Well, first of all, a lot of these groups don't have that much to do with each other. I mean, especially we're looking at Hezbollah and ISIS. I mean, these are definitely different groups. It's only in the West, in most people's minds, they think that these things are similar because they're taught to hate both of them and equate both of them. They're completely different. Hezbollah emerged in the 80s, and it's a resistance group. The only reason Israel has not invaded Lebanon in the last 15 years is because of Hezbollah. Because, in 2005, you had this assassination of Hariri, Lebanese prime minister, and it was blamed on Syria, but it's been proven it had nothing to do with Syria because the only consequence of this was a Syrian withdrawal of Syrian troops. Now, me personally, I don't think Syrian troops should be anywhere else except in Syria, right? I think they should stay there. But the reasoning was that it was to fend off Israel. And it's true. 1 year later, after Syria withdrew, what happened? Israel invaded Lebanon. They invaded in July. It lasted about 33 days, right? I was next door in Damascus, and Hezbollah taught them a lesson, and that's why they haven't come back in 15 years. And before that, in the year 2000, I mean, who liberated South Lebanon? Hezbollah. So, completely different roots, ideology, thinking, and purpose. And when we look at Hamas is also in a resistance group in Palestine, in Gaza, and they won the elections there in 2006. And they've been under a blockade since 2007. And, Israel uses Hamas basically as a political tool to kind of malign the Palestinians, say, oh, look at these extremists. Oh, we have to go bomb them, etc., etc. But Hamas is fundamentally a resistance movement, fundamentally, right? Just as Hezbollah is. And, that's why Iran supports both of them. And when we talk about now the Taliban and the Mujahideen and ISIS and Al-Qaeda, this is completely different because these groups were created, or at least the conditions in which they were created, right? This was aided by the United States, and certainly not as a resistance movement. I mean, the whole purpose of helping the Mujahideen to fend off the Soviets wasn't because, the Americans have some kind of deep love for Afghan resistance. They wanted to contain communism and fend off the Soviet Union and, strengthen and fortify American influence, right? So there's an ideological and geopolitical battle going on here. And so, the Mujahideen at the time, I was going to do a video on this just in a second, so we're going to come back to them anyway. But many of them went on afterwards to form Taliban in 94, and then, of course, you had Al-Qaeda around the same time, this exact same time period, just before that. And so many of these people, like I said, they were armed by the CIA. They were armed by the United States. And they're a very beneficial and profitable political tool because the United States creates these people, it arms them, it helps them take hold, and then it claims, oh, we have to go fight these threats, which we created, as even Hillary Clinton admits. And then they go and make billions and billions and trillions of dollars fighting these threats that they created. So completely different purposes here. And, when we talk about also the Mujahideen, we have to consider that the United States, because of its special relationship with Saudi Arabia, because they need oil, they've always turned a blind eye to Saudi Arabia exporting Wahhabism, right? And, building all these schools in Pakistan and, of course, contributing to the Mujahideen because, they wanted, they were afraid of them. They were afraid of losing control in Saudi Arabia. So they just basically encouraged all these people, go fight in Afghanistan. Go fight in Afghanistan. And, and of course, when we talk about ISIS, this is basically a result of the U.S. invasion in 2003. They came in, they toppled Saddam. They have a power vacuum that's created in Iraq. And you have all these nasty groups coming out of the woodwork. And of course, Al-Qaeda was one of them, right? And then they go and create these offshoots, these rebrands in Syria, like Al-Nusra and now HTS. And, that's why we call them 50 flavors of jihad. But they're fundamentally people that have always been known to the U.S. intelligence agencies. When you look at, for example, Zarqawi, or you look at, for example, Baghdadi, right, who Trump killed, allegedly. If you look at a lot of these leaders of these groups, whether we're talking about Al-Qaeda in Iraq, Al-Qaeda in Syria, or ISIS, a lot of them were in U.S. custody at many points. So, I mean, the U.S. either radicalized them and used them as assets or helped give conditions to create these people. And this is not even considering the fact that during the Cold War, they were directly giving money to these people. Like, they spent $500 million. And some of that money, of course, where does it wind up? It winds up in the pockets of people like Zawahiri, who's number 2 in Al-Qaeda. And I'm going to get to him in a bit. So, there's a very, very big difference between these groups. Hamas, Hezbollah, these are, resistance groups fighting Israeli occupation and U.S. occupation. And these other groups, they look at Al-Qaeda and Israel working together. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know. Al-Qaeda and the U.S. working together. Well, what more do I need to say? What more do I need to say? So I know people in the media, they confuse the names a lot because, if you go watch CNN and you go watch MSNBC, they want you to think that, oh yeah, anything with an Arabic or Muslim sounding name is like, automatically equals something terrorist, right? This is the brainwashing that they do. And so they I think even Ilhan Omar, she was saying some bullshit like, the U.S. is the same as the Taliban and Hamas. Why are you mixing these things together that have nothing to do with each other? Like, this is absurd. So, no, I mean, again, this is a very brief summary here. I don't know if, I think we should definitely go into more detail. And I mean, we do usually. But yeah, this is very brief. Don't let the U.S. media or even U.S. politicians who claim to mean well confuse you about the nature of these groups. Because if you go and you ask the Israelis and you ask the British and you ask the Americans, of course they want you to think that Hamas is a terrorist group and Hezbollah is a terrorist group. Yeah, because when you are invading someone's country and occupying them, anyone who resists is a terrorist, of course. So to them, of course, these groups are terrorists, but they're resistance fronts. There's a big difference. And none of these people were CIA assets. They never received CIA money. They are not fulfilling CIA agendas. So just, you shall know them by their fruit. Yes? So I hope that was adequate. Although, we'll go into more detail, of course, as we always do.